Hi guys, it's the Home Improvement Dr. Darren here. I just wanted to make a video continuing from the first video, which was about planning your project, the do's and don'ts and the things to look out for and take into consideration. However, I've been thinking today that I could do with really spending a little bit more time talking about a project more in detail, which is home extensions, because it probably needs a little bit more time spent specifically about that sort of project. So I'd like to give you some of my information, my advice on planning before actually starting the process with a builder or tradesperson. What you should be doing beforehand and how you should incorporate your planning into that process. By the way, please excuse me, I've got my dressing gown on. I've just got back from work. I got absolutely soaked today. I went out without a raincoat, without any waterproofs, but my phone this morning said there was going to be no rain, which was wrong again. I was working on a flat roof, got slightly wet. Then we had to expose some drainage on an extension. I was actually on my knees in water, getting absolutely soaked. So please excuse me, I've just got back, put me wet, dirty clothes in the washing machine, and got my dressing gown on to dry out. So please excuse that. However, let's get on to the talking about extensions. If that's your proposed project, next project, or in the future, save this sort of information for that time. Because really, it takes a bit more planning to get an extension underway. And there's two different sorts of extensions I want to talk about. Obviously, the standard extension that needs you to go through the planning process, and permitted developments, which is quite relatively new. In my lifetime, it's relatively new, and it requires no need to go through the planning departments and the process that a normal extension would require. On saying this, if your extension, I would like to give you some advice to research. Once you know roughly what you want regarding an extension, if it's a two-story, even if it's a two-story extension, there's some really good YouTube videos that give you really quick, basic advice on where your proposed extension will, which category it'll belong in, and you may be surprised that it may come under permitted developments, which is very, very easy for the homeowner to go through that process themselves. However, if it is larger and you don't fit the criteria of permitted developments, then it is another process which will require planning permission. I would advise you, please, to just educate yourself on the things, on YouTube, or even if you've got an AI app, ask on that one. But there's some really good basic YouTube videos, give you some great advice, which will establish whether your proposed extension is going to be permitted or go through the planning department, your local planning department. So I want to talk to you about how to plan this in the first place before contacting builders. It's going to include contacting somebody, builders or something, but rather than you just jump in and presume that you'll need an architect, a chartered architect, or a building company straight away, I'd like to educate you on whether you're going to need an architect or not, and that's entirely your choice whether you do or not. once I've given you the information. If it's permitted development, which probably will account now for the large percentage of extensions that are carried out in the UK. Generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, a permitted development will be, for example, on a semi-detached house, will be the width of the house and up to 3 metres out. Though there was talk about that going further to six metres. I'm not sure at this point if that's actually been passed through Parliament at the moment, but I will find out. But if it's a single-storey extension, say for a kitchen diner, extending, at the back of your property or the side of your property, and it's permitted, you establish that. So I think it's wise for you to watch some of the videos and educate yourself before you do it, because it will save you, or could save you, some money. Now, if it's permitted development, you're going to need building control involved. Whatever happens, if it's a dwelling, habitable dwelling, it's going to need building control. These people, if you're not aware, these people, this organisation, can be either council or private companies now, that come and check the progress of your work and make sure that it's safe, thermally insulated correctly, and that the builder or whoever's doing it, whether you're doing that yourself, the work's carried out to the standards, to their standards for safety and for insulation purposes and so on. That the building control will stand whatever, as long as it's a dwelling. You'll need building control. You'll have to inform those and pay their fees. However, if it's a permitted development, you're under no obligation to actually contact your planning department. Something people feel insecure about. You can do, and there's a process you can go through to contact them, but you're under no obligation to supply a drawing, and if you do, you could do that by hand. That I know it sounds ridiculous, but please hear me out. You can do that by hand. You could do a sketch, a reasonable sketch. If you can produce one on a user-friendly design app, that's great. The building control may request one, but once they've made the first visit and they understand where the project's going, all they'll want to do is watch the progress under the conditions that it's within the permitted developments. It's not really their business. The planning department's not building controls business really, but they will probably want to know. Now, one of the big mistakes that I see is that regardless, homeowners will by default want to contact a chartered architect to do a set of drawings for even a permitted development project. Now, that, in my experience, is anything from £2,000 upwards for say a 6 or 7 by 3 single-storey extension. That may make you feel more secure, but there are some people out there that could make better use of £2,000 or £3,000. And trust me, I would advise anybody to not spend that money. I'm not saying waste it, but not spend that money on drawings. And the reason is, over my 43 years in this game, in the domestic construction industry, things have changed quite a lot over the years, and one of the biggest things that we see is that architects are supplying drawings for homeowners that, bar the outer dimensions, there's nothing more useful on that drawing that the client has paid £2,000, £3,000 for. Us builders will know the process. These are standard, these are bread and butter for a lot of builders. Any half decent builder will know how to construct that extension blindfold. They're easy. Drainage, issues and installation issues. A good builder will know the, the building regulations to construct the small extension like that. Easy. It's a good builder will know how to do a big 2-story extension, but these are bread and butter. They're actually bread and butter for the architects. Now you get a chartered architect in who's got 30, 40 years behind him. He's probably, or she, has probably been doing grand designs, or big projects. These are nothing for an architect to produce. A couple of hours on a survey, meeting the clients, going rounds to the property. A couple of hours producing, if they're fluent on an AutoCAD or SketchUp or Revit or something like this. A couple of hours producing a drawing, and that's pretty much the work done. I know there's going to be a lot of architects out there who are probably going to say, well, you've got that wrong. If it's for permitted developments, I don't think I have. I think 4 or 5 hours work is about as much as they'll be doing for the £2,000. This said, I'm a great admirer of architects, to the point when I was a child I wanted to be an architect. I didn't end up being an architect, I was a builder. I admire them. I'd done AutoCAD 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I never pursued it. I'm not a bitter builder, wannabe architect. I still admire them. I have architect friends who I want to talk to deeply to gain some knowledge from them, and so I do admire them. And if you're an architect, I do admire you, honestly, but you'll know this is true if you're an architect. Once they're produced, these days, once they've produced a set of drawings, basic drawings as well, to the clients, it seems more common these days that there's not enough detail for the client, not necessarily for the builder, but for the clients to get a very decent, accurate quote from the drawings. So things change, and there's things that may have been overlooked that the architect didn't spot, that now the builders come across and got to correspond with the client to solve these issues that I believe that the architect should have spotted in the first place. It's time and time and time again over the last 15 years, maybe more, that things are being missed from drawings, or there's not enough detail in the drawings. So listen, if it's not an architect's job anymore to go through the details of the extension, the project, then it's the builder's job. And I agree, the builder needs to spend time going through the drawings and discussing the amount of plug sockets, lighting, what style of skirting, the type of windows, the doors, the bifold, whether the bifold, what colours. They're all going to make a difference on the estimate or quote. If things do change, then it may be a shock to you, the homeowner, and it may end up an uncomfortable situation between you and the builder. Also, a good architect should know what sort of ground your property sits on. If he's a local architect, he should know. Your property could be sitting on an old mining area that may need different foundations. That could make a dramatic amount of difference in cost to the project if your architect hasn't picked that up. If your builder doesn't know, a good builder should know as well. If he's local, he may know. But if they don't, when they come to do the excavation for the foundations, building control will come along and tell you exactly what you've got to do. If it's a raft foundation instead of a strip foundation, it could be 3, 4, 5 times more going in the ground, in cost. It could be dramatic, really dramatic. A good architect should tell you that, and a good builder should tell you that if he's local and he knows the area. However, some builders do, or used to, rely on the architect to raise these issues and for the clients, for the homeowner, so they're aware from that point. So what I'm saying is, if your project is permitted development, there's no issues for planning. There may be issues with certain, there's always going to be an issue for building control on how deep you need to dig the foundations, because different ground will need different depths and different types of concrete or styles of foundation. That's a fact of life. So you need to make a contingency for that before you get going. I also want to make you aware, if your project requires a planning, to go through planning, it's not in the criteria of a permitted development project, then by all means, you're not legally required, by the way, but by all means, get a chartered architect, a good local one. But what I'd like to tell you is to source these architects like you would source builders and tradespeople, because one architect may offer one service that another architect doesn't, and you need to know what they're providing before they turn up, because once they turn up and start measuring up, they'll want paying. Don't want to go back now and do a set of drawings. And by the law of this land, once one architect has done one set of drawings and put details in those drawings, that architect owns the rights to that drawing. So for you to get an amended drawing, if that architect, so for example, didn't want to be involved after he's provided those drawings, you'll need a new set of drawings from another architect at probably the same cost, which will take him less time. I've seen this happen. However, if you do need amendments, some architects will want to charge for every time anything's amended, if you'd need anything amended on your drawings. It's not a requirement, legal requirement, that your architect should be chartered. And we do believe that chartered architects are the best. They are, especially if you wanted a grand design building or an estate or a block of flats or something like that. They're bound to be, especially if they're experienced, the better option. However, if it's just a double-storey extension or a wraparound, a single-storey wraparound or something like this, there are other options, and let me tell you about these. It's a relatively new service, but there are people, architectural designers they're called, they're not allowed to call themselves chartered architects or architects, because it's an infringement of description of their job. But there are a lot of good people about that could do the design for you, similar to an architect, and give you probably a more thorough service. There are people, the project managers for domestic home improvement works, the companies and people that will do a project management service, initially by giving you a drawing, doing a survey, giving you a drawing, and then manage the project all the way through. I don't think that's a bad idea, especially if you're very naive or too busy to manage the project yourself, because this gives you a barrier between you and the builder or the construction company. They should manage the payment schemes, the quotations, so on and so forth, and they should manage the progress all the way through. To what extent will vary between different companies, but they're quite rare. So if you can source one of these and you don't mind paying the extra, they may save you money in the long run. Also, you've got to be aware that they may have people on board, builders on board, that they get kickbacks off. So there may be putting forward their own builders, their own tradespeople to get kickbacks off them, so they'll get more money, blah blah blah, for advising you to employ these people. Always, if you have this service, stay in control. Stay in control of your project, and make sure that you don't lose. You're not going to lose control before you start. You should always have the ultimate say and the ultimate right to stop things. If things get complicated. There is another service which is a quantity surveyor for domestic properties. These will do similar projects and dependent. If you can source one of those, they're quite rare. I've never really come across one of those, but all this service is quite new for the domestic industry. However, I think it's a fantastic option if you can afford it, or if you're too busy, and managing things yourself is too much of a daunting task for you. So anyway, what I want to say is, plan what you want as regards an extension. Educate yourself on YouTube whether your proposed extension now will come within the criteria of permitted developments. If it is, that's fantastic. Then have a thought about whether you actually do need to employ and spend the money on an architect for that purpose. If your extension is outside the permitted development criteria, you've still got an option whether you employ a chartered architect or not, or just a designer, somebody who's fluent in architectural design. They don't have to be that fluent. Believe it or not, the planning department don't need tiny details of your project. They will want to know a certain list of criteria about that thing, but it's quite easy to fill that form in yourself and provide the drawings yourself. The process is quite simple, and but the point is, it is really about how to set out while you're making these plans. Make some drawings if you can, hand drawings. Take some measurements. It's not that difficult. Even if you get the measurements wrong, we're not at this point. It's not critical that you get it down to the millimetre. But take some measurements, some rough measurements. Do some sketches, and make some sketches of what you'd like as an extension. And taking all this into account, once we get on to sourcing good tradesmen and good builders, and so on, if you can source a good building company, a builder who could supply drawings for you, or could manage the planning process for you, if that builder is the one that is going to carry out the work, they'll know the details. They'll become more tuned into the details if they're there from the planning, from the start of planning the project and discussing that with you from that point. So that would be an ideal situation. You become, hopefully the rapport between yourselves and that builder would strengthen before they start work. They'd know what you want, and they'd have a feel about how you'd like that process to go and what your needs are. So that's worth a point. While you're sourcing builders, if it's an extension, then inquire whether they do drawings, whether they provide the planning service for you. It may be the same cost as an architect, and the process of of you putting the thing through the planning process. But it might be a better one if they're going to stay with you throughout the progress till the end. The rapport may be better from the start. Okay, I hope that's been useful for you, for anybody who's having any extensions done. Look out for my next video, which is on how to source good tradespeople correctly. Thanks very much. I look forward to seeing you soon.